So, where's everybody else?
I don't know. They should be here.
Maybe they didn't show up because they knew that you would be here.
Oh, that's absurd. Your grandpa made it.
What are you talking about? He's not even here.
What are you talking about? He's right here with us.
You forgot to get him cremated?
No, I just couldn't afford to.
What? Couldn't afford to?
You know that I'm a cheapskate.
So, how much was the turkey?
Hey, I thought we weren't going to discuss politics at the table.
What does that have to...
Inflation. Prices equal politics. End of discussion.
I'm gonna get some more mashed potatoes. Do you need anything?
I think I'm good for now.
Oh! Wow, fruit brute. There's a mascot nobody talks about.
Huh? Oh, yeah, I forgot to finish that box like 2 years ago. I was surprised they brought him back.
Yeah.
Yeah. Still haven't seen the fruity yummy mummy come back yet, though.
Yeah. See, most people are familiar with the General Mills monster cereal mascots that come around every October. Frankenberry, Boo Berry, Count Chocula. Those are the main three that everyone knows, but the other two mascots that weren't used as much were Fruit Brute and the Fruity Yummy Mummy.
When the monster cereals were introduced in 1971, it started with just Frankenberry and Count Chocula. Obviously both friendly parodies on the characters of Dracula and Frankenstein's monster. Then Boo Berry was introduced a year later. Then after that, Fruit Brute was then later introduced in 1974, and the Fruity Yummy Mummy wouldn't join the rest of the gang until 1988. But most of the time, General Mills stuck with the first three in the line. They don't seem to use the other two very much for whatever reason. They only seem to bring them back every once in a full blue moon for very rare occasions. Heck, last year they even introduced another mascot, Carmela Creeper. I assume they made her to appeal to the children of this millennium. But yeah, mostly nobody really talks about these two mascots despite them being kinda cool. Fun fact, Quentin Tarantino is a big fan of Fruit Brute, which is why he had a box of it in one scene of Pulp Fiction.
Actually, that's kind of interesting to discuss. I mean, mascots are iconic symbols of the products they represent. They help you remember the product more with some kind of jingle, theme song, or witty catchphrase. Now, everybody's familiar with the mascots that are still around. They have a huge career, they're still collecting paychecks and all of that, but there were some that did not get the needed exposure like the others did. So, they didn't do as well. So, let's look back at some obscure mascots from different products. Whether you remember them or not, it's cool to talk about what happened to certain mascots from food products or fast food joints or other items just to see what happened to them and to see if they were failures.
Lots of product mascots revolve around cereal, so we'll be talking about cereal for a little bit. Not to be confused with the classic Atari game of the same name, Kaboom is a cereal made by General Mills with an unnamed clown as its mascot. Honestly, the name is pretty good, but it does sound like a fake cereal name you'd hear from a movie or a cartoon like Sugar Bombs or Chocolatey Chocolate Balls. But yeah, the clown wasn't all too special when cereal came out in 1969. It wouldn't be discontinued until 2010. Kinda strange because I never even saw or knew that this cereal existed throughout my lifetime until just now. But eventually he'd also get his own Funko Pop figure. Ironically, a box of Kaboom was also used as a prop in Kill Bill Volume 1, another Quentin Tarantino movie. I guess he has a thing for obscure General Mills cereal. Now let's get into the subject of the many Kellogg's mascots, starting with this thing. In 1990, Kellogg's introduced the cereal Big Mix with this indescribable mascot. Apparently he's supposed to be a combination of 4 different animals because it has the wild appetites of a moose, a wolf, a pig, and a chicken. I guess I can see it now when I look at the different animal traits, but good grief, who came up with this? Obviously nobody seemed to care about it as its lifespan only lasted about 2 years. Now, before Snap, Crackle, and Pop would be the main mascots for Kellogg's Rice Krispies, Cocoa Krispies originally started out with an elephant, and even a monkey sometimes. Heck, even Snagglepuss would be on the cover. But a couple cereals like Combos, whether it was strawberry, orange, or chocolate flavored that came out in 1969, had this friendly-looking monster mascot called the Blue New. I'm pretty sure we haven't seen him since. Next to him would be this blue giraffe from something called Triple Snack that came out in 1963.
It's new Kellogg's Triple Snack. Well, Triple Snack will get you if you don't watch out.
Next up, we have Bixby Beaver, who was the mascot for Kellogg's Crunchy Logs, introduced in 1979. Seems clever enough. Corn and oat cereal in the shapes of logs, a beaver wearing a lumberjack-like outfit. Seems like a no-brainer, but it didn't seem to catch on as it only lasted on the shelves for about a year. Now, I'm sure Cornflakes needs no introduction. Everybody knows the original iconic logo of the red and green rooster on the box, but did you know that they changed the rooster to look more like an actual mascot like Tony the Tiger? Yep. Though Cornflakes came out in 1906, Cornelius Rooster, or Corny, would be introduced in 1957 and would be in a handful of commercials. But I don't think he's had any exposure since the mid-90s because now Kellogg's just uses the same bland generic rooster image they used before. Some people still seem to remember Corny because even he got his own Funko Pop figure as well. Now, here's a mascot I'm sure you've never heard about, Tony Jr. That's right, Tony the Tiger had a son. Kinda like Sylvester and Sylvester Jr. Literally just after a year from Tony's debut, Tony Jr. was the mascot for Kellogg's Frosted Rice.
Did he say Frosted Flakes? Nope, it's Frosted Rice.
Which was later renamed to Frosted Krispies in 1982, and then it was ultimately discontinued. Even though Tony the Tiger is still around, I have to wonder what ever happened to Tony Jr. Well, apparently in May 2021, Tony Jr. was found shot dead in Miami, Florida with 5 kilos of cocaine in his bag. There's an ongoing investigation whether or not Tony Jr. was involved in a drug trade.
What? Okay, I don't know where that came from, but I swear I am not making this up. This is all coming from a wiki that I saw when I was trying to look up some information about Tony Jr. For real. Anyway, let's move on from Kellogg's.
Quisp and Quake were the cereal mascots from Quaker that were introduced in 1965, somewhat being a duo together. Though Quake may not be as well known, Quisp seems to be the more popular of the two. After it had a successful run, it was taken off shelves in the mid-70s, but came back briefly in the mid-80s, was taken off again, and it came back yet again in the mid-90s, but it was apparently only available for online purchase.
Which, even for the 90s, that makes no sense.
Ultimately, Quisp came back once more in 2008, but was sold in limited quantities in select areas of Dollar General stores. Quake looks pretty cool, like if a construction worker turned into a superhero. Quisp obviously looks like a silly pink alien with a propeller for a head. Lost, but not forgotten. If Quisp really is popular enough to bring back repeatedly, why not just keep them on the shelves, and not somewhere where it's limited and hard to get? Just put it next to Captain Crunch like every other grocery store. At least Quaker can get more money from that rather than orange Quangaroos, because I'm sure nobody remembers Simon the Quangaroo. Now, for a long while, and probably still today, Post had no idea how to promote honeycomb cereal. Though a good cereal, I just don't think they could find a mascot that would stick. At first, they tried a cowboy-looking mascot called the Honeycomb Kid that came around the 1960s, and then afterwards changed to look more like a cross between Indiana Jones and Mighty Max, and he faded away into the early 90s. Then in the mid-90s came this crazy-looking animal called the Crazy Craving Honeycomb Monster that kids would change into if they're craving honeycombs. I swear, I thought this was a fever dream back when I was younger because I vaguely remember this creepy abomination. Even Funko seems to remember him because they even gave him a Funko Pop. So they needed to give that nightmare a break, and instead in 2007 they introduced another mascot named Bernard the Bee Boy. The story goes that he was raised by bees.
I took Bernard, the boy raised by bees, to the zoo, where he immediately noticed an animal fond of honey.
Clearly that sounds like a winner.
Well, I guess I can't blame the company for at least trying to think of a mascot. I mean, they clearly couldn't use a bee because General Mills already had one for their Honey Nut Cheerio cereal, which came out in 1979. Wait, when did Honeycombs come out? 1965. Well, that's on post for not thinking of that first.
Now, when Mountain Dew first came out, it was originally intended to be a mixer for whiskey back in 1940. So, they made a mascot around that concept named Willie the Hillbilly. But, did you know that 7-Up also had a mascot for a while? Yep. He was called Cool Spot, introduced in 1987, and through the 90s, he looked like another one of those cool and hip mascots that wore sunglasses to let it be known that he was cool. He must have been cool enough because he even had his own video games. Sadly, Cool Spot has been seen since 1998, but in a way you could say he's still around. That red dot that you see on the cover of the 7-Up bottles, he's probably still there, just turned around, like his back is towards us. Chester Cheetah was introduced a year before Cool Spot and appeared to be way cooler than he was. To this day, he's still the iconic mascot for Cheetos. But, did you know that before Chester, originally there was a mouse mascot? Around the 1970s, Cheeto introduced this mouse mascot. I mean, it makes sense because mice love cheese, but it clearly didn't catch on because that radical cheetah managed to become more popular than he ever was, and the poor mouse was left in the Cheeto dust. Speaking of cheese, remember the Cheezosaurus Rex? He was awesome. Introduced in 1991, he became the mascot for Kraft's macaroni and cheese for a good while until he disappeared in the late 2000s. That's a shame, I really liked him. He seemed like the most ideal and kid-friendly mascot for mac and cheese. Obviously, it's the #1 dinner for kids, and he was definitely a great idea to appeal to kids with a dinosaur that's probably made of 85% cheese. Hopefully they'll bring him back someday. His commercials were pretty cool. Now, another mascot that was a bit short-lived was Agent Cool Blue. I already talked about this product before in a prior video, but the kid-friendly Listerine bottles had to be taken away. 4 million bottles were recalled because the product's preservatives didn't control any microorganisms to reveal the plaque on your teeth to brush away. So, Agent Cool Blue's career only consisted of a few months on the shelves. Now, some may remember the Alka-Seltzer's mascot, Speedy. Not to be confused with McDonald's first mascot of the same name, Speedy was introduced in 1951. In the early commercials, he was voiced by Dick Beals, who also did the voice of Gumby. Anyway, Speedy has been around for a long time, and his last commercial appearance was around the late 2000s, I believe. Now, even though he's been around for many years, normally I wouldn't bring him up, but nobody really talks about Speedy. Like, at all. But at least he's nothing like the Nasonex bee. He was creepy. Yeah, this CGI bee always creeped me out. Not sure why. Probably because he was more realistic looking as opposed to the Honey Nut Cheerios bee. He looks like something I'd see from a PlayStation video game with those graphics, or perhaps like one of those bees I'd see in that honey stage from Spyro Enter the Dragonfly. But his big bug eyes and voice were just unsettling to me, to say the least.
For you, my sweet. I see you are overcome with love.
Oh wait, he was voiced by Antonio Banderas. Huh. But anyway, they would later change the look of the bee to make him look more realistic. Then way later, they changed it into a female to make the bee more feminine looking and, seductive.
I think I'll pass.
Now, this is probably the most obscure mascot on this list. From CK Snacks, which I'm sure not a lot of people know, their mascot in the 2000s was the Munchster. He was the main mascot for their cheese snacks, probably because his nose looked just like a giant cheese ball. But I remember having these snacks.
Mainly because there was this thing on the back of the bag where you'd have to cut out and collect a certain amount of stamps or tokens or whatever they were, and then you would mail them in. Then, after a good couple of weeks, eventually you would get your own free Munchster plushie. Yeah. Now, I did that quite a handful of times when I was a kid. Like, that's how I got this Kung Fu Panda blanket many years ago, and also this Kid Cuisine backpack.
Now, for a while, Fritos had their own mascot, the Frito Bandito. Introduced in 1967, he was a Mexican bandit who stuck around until 1971 due to people complaining about the racist imagery around him.
Yeah, I guess I can understand that. Unlike the Taco Bell Chihuahua, which was awesome and they should really bring back.
Speaking of fast food joints, remember the Arby's oven mitt for their mascot? He was another one that was very short-lived. I believe he was introduced in early 2004, but I guess because he looked way too similar to the Hamburger Helper glove, they probably were afraid of infringement. Plus, it didn't help that this mascot had real-life oven mitts made in his image, but they had to be recalled in late 2004 because of quality concerns of the material used to make the oven mitts. So this poor guy's career had a bad reputation right from the start. So he got the boot in early 2005 and hasn't been seen since.
Thou shalt not speak any blasphemous words towards our Lord and Savior, the hamburger helper glove, who has given us dehydrated, high sodium, high cholesterol, easily made meals throughout the majority of our life.
Now, I don't doubt lots of people still remember the usual suspects of the McDonald's game. Ronald, Grimace, the Hamburglar, and even Birdie. But two particular mascots that hadn't been seen in years are Mayor McCheese and Officer Big Mac. While they're already creepy enough by themselves, the reason why we haven't seen them since the mid-80s was because of HR Pufnstuf. Yeah, just because Mayor McCheese had a similar shape of head, he was pulled from the McDonald's lineup. That's pretty dumb, really. Just because they so happen to coincidentally have the same shape of a head, the difference being that he's a friggin' burger, but people still remember them. Also, remember Mac Tonight? He was another McDonald's mascot that was also a bit creepy, that helped to advertise for evening sales. He was introduced in 1986, and I don't think he's been seen since the 90s. Here's something interesting. Back when Mac Tonight was still around, employees would wear a full-size costume of him along with a mask to greet guests, but afterwards the costumes were either thrown away or lost completely. Even though he looks like a much creepier, deformed version of Max Headroom, I think they should bring him back. That is, if McDonald's ever brings back their 24-hour openings. However, with one mascot I'm surprised they recently brought back was Domino's Noid. Also introduced in 1986, the Noid was this crazy-looking guy in a rabbit costume who always wanted to destroy Domino's pizza. He's seen as this claymation character that looks totally bizarre, but just like Cool Spot and Chester Cheetah, the Noid also had a video game. Though he was let go in 1989, he came back briefly in 2021 in full CGI to advertise some new commercials. Pretty surprised he came back. Maybe there was high demand. Now, I'm sure people are also familiar with the Green Giant, but there was this little guy named Sprout. He came out in 1973, I'm assuming to help advertise towards kids, but he faded into obscurity somewhere in the 90s. Huh. I wonder what happened to him.
Well, those are a big handful of obscure and forgotten mascots. There's definitely more of them out there, so maybe we can continue this at another time if you really want it. But anyway, I gotta get back to my Thanksgiving meal.
Sorry, Uncle Arnold, I was...
Just one more.
Well, that's a Thanksgiving coma for you.
Ho ho ho.
Hey!